And really today we've got three exceptional leaders here to talk to us about the power of leadership. How do we reframe the leadership conversation? How do we better empower leaders for them to continue on their path of curating spaces and environments that are enablement tools and grounds for others to thrive? We're going to also just talk a little bit about this conversation from the lens of the SME environment. Of course, we know in South Africa that SMEs contribute about 34% towards our GDP. So, against a backdrop of not only corporate, but I think the wider landscape at large, what is the new model of leadership? How should we be thinking about leadership? And how best do we position our leaders to great economy? And so with me today, I have got VANNIE PILLAY from Oaktree People Solutions. I've got Mike Elliott from the Cape Union Mart Group, as well as Rishi. If I can maybe ask each of you very briefly to quickly introduce yourselves.
Thanks, Andisa. Perhaps you go, I'll go first. VANNIE PILLAY, from the CEO and founder of Oaktree People Solutions, and for us, why this is important. We want to be the voice, the leadership voice that brings in the expertise of people like Mike and Rishi to share their experience and their expertise with entrepreneurs and leaders that are looking for answers to important problems of leadership.
Thanks, VANNIE. I'm Rishi. I'm happy to be part of the conversation. I'm the current human capital executive at the Cape Union Mart Group.
Wonderful. Mike.
Super, and I'm Mike Elliott. I am, I've been in retail for 30 odd years. And I've covered the full spectrum of what I would call small business and ownership and leading a small business, as well as a medium-sized enterprise as part of a multinational, and then more recently running two larger retailers. And I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer, Group Chief Executive Officer for the Cape Union Mart Group.
Excellent. Thank you all, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. I know our audience is as well. So perhaps maybe let's set the scene a little bit. I heard the other day from a Kenyan colleague of mine at a conference I was attending, when he said something so profound, and it really left me with a lot of thought. And he said, the illiterate of the 21st century are learn and relearn, right? And I think we've seen with the compound and unintended effects of COVID that we've all had to redefine what is leadership in the new world. Perhaps, Mike, let's start with you. Having been a leader for a couple of years, you've led both large organizations and small SMEs. What is now your definition of leadership in the context of today?
Yeah, so Andisa, funnily enough, I think we're having to deal with a number of new concepts post the COVID era, but I think the fundamentals of leadership haven't changed. Really, I think those have remained consistent throughout the period. I guess to some extent, what they've done is highlighted how more important just clear thought processes around leadership are, to be honest. And I guess I say that in the context of, I'll put it as a having been in retail for 30 years, a little bit of running the risk of being an old guard thinker is transitioning into the world of remote working. And really highlighting the leadership characteristic of being able to trust your people, and not using old school techniques of directing and supervising, and really empowering teams and managing by objective and inspiring your team. So, for me, that was a big shift in leadership that happened some time ago. It wasn't a COVID thing. And so I don't think those leadership principles per se have changed because of COVID, but I think some of the workplace environments have highlighted the need to really elevate those leadership skills. And
Right,
even
right.
that for me has been a highlighting journey, if I can put it that way, and something
Yeah.
someone still continues to grapple with.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. VANNIE, I mean, as someone who runs a people consultancy firm, you obviously engage with a lot of C-suite executive leaders. What are some of the anecdotal conversations around where is the leadership paradigm, or do they echo, I guess, some of Mike's sentiment around we haven't fundamentally changed how we lead people? Perhaps the how might look a little different. I mean, you speak to a lot of C-suite execs. What are you hearing?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Andisa. I think anecdotally, let me tell you what I hear, and specifically my experiences in the SME space with entrepreneurs that are in scale up and growing their businesses resonates very much with what Mike is saying. For me, for them, and certainly for us all, the word leadership and empowerment has been bantered around for decades, for years. It's nothing new. We all know, and they know, that empowering employees increases the employee engagement. And we also know that if they engage, then they're productive and they perform. I think where the disconnect is a word that Mike used that caught me now is trust. It is fundamentally built on the trust relationship between a leader and the employee. So because empowerment is about firstly giving me the skills as I understand the definition, and that's what we're going to talk about today, right? The resources, the authority, and the opportunity to hold people responsible and accountable. And then that will contribute to the competence and the satisfaction. But what most of the leaders and entrepreneurs are battling with is these questions, and exactly the how that Mike has alluded to. How do I engage my employees? How do I ensure that I'm inclusive as a leader, they are committed? How do I ensure that I get them to be the best versions of themselves, that I've got a high performance team? How do I make them understand the big picture? Why are we all here? What do we need to do? So those questions are still there, which means then back to Mike's comment is we know, the definitions. We know that it's been around for decades, but for me, it's the how, and I think the how has become a lot more difficult for three reasons. One, it's the disruption, the technological disruption, the things that keep leaders up at night, doing more with less. It is about the social context and how the social context and the economic context is shifting. And then it's about the employee experience, their own lives, in what is it that they need to remain, productive, and what do they need from leaders. So for me, that's the how is becoming a lot more difficult for leaders if you had to ask me what they're searching for.
Yeah. I mean, I love that description. In fact, it reminds me of a story that Simon Sinek often references when he talks about how they select the Navy SEALs. And when he interviewed the guys, one of the gentlemen said, I would rather have on my team someone that I trust with my money and my wife versus a great technical resource. And so it's interesting, I think that's coming up, that, I think the trust dividend ranks really, really high on the scale of priorities. And maybe for you, Rishi, I mean, you work in the people space, right? Like you spearhead conversations around creating, I think, subset of cultures and values and things that hopefully bridge that gap, right? And enhances that trust dividend. What are some of the things that you've been focusing on in your organization the last couple of years? Maybe one or two high-level examples to kind of bring it to life.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Trust is the currency that our teams deal with. Most people define a team as a group of individuals that assemble together with a common purpose to achieve common goals. But I like Simon Sinek's definition of a team. He says a team is a group of individuals that trust one another. So that's what we've been building our values and our culture on, to understand that if you're leading a team, you've got to make sure that you trust your team. And the team is, and we're seeing that the evidence of that, the only time that teams are productive is that when the leader and the team themselves trust one another. And once your trust currency is high, you can create magic. We find that trust being the base of our culture. And in the absence of trust, it's very difficult to talk about values and purpose or anything like that. So trust is the foundation that everything is built on. So tangibly, we built our values and our culture and our roadmap based on the principle of trust.
Yeah,
trust is our first value.
I love that because really and truly, it is important to create a culture of trust where people, yes, have autonomy, but they also know that they can rely on their teammates for support. And maybe I want to go to Mike. I mean, Mike, as a leader of other leaders, what would you say are some of the challenges that either you've seen as a chief exec, and I guess from the different exco teams that you've had the privilege to lead? Like, what are leaders grappling with in this day and age?
Yeah, so it's been slightly nuanced and different for every group that I've led. Every team has its own dynamic, but certainly a common theme that certainly over the three groups of leaders that I've led has been this concept of both trust, but in order to unpack the trust within a team, what it's really involved is a journey of emotional intelligence. And in order to unpack that in all three instances, I've had to put all three teams through basically a group therapy session with an organizational psychologist. And that's been, in all three instances, the most powerful unlock and needle shifter in all three of those teams. All the issues have been different, and all teams have issues. And the challenges and environments, some have been in robust, growing, simple environments with complexity because of multinational nature. Others have been environments where business is tough, and you've been through COVID, and the teams have been a whole series of traumatic events. All of them have different challenges, but at the core is truly understanding one another and being able to be vulnerable, share their personal playlists, a key term that comes out in all of it, and what triggers individuals, and truly being vulnerable and understanding one another at a much deeper level, and bringing this concept of emotional intelligence and vulnerability into a leadership style. And as I say, that's been a common theme through all three of the last teams that I've led, and it's been immensely powerful and uplifting, actually.
Yeah.
Andisa, if I may just also add on that.
Yes, please jump in.
Rishi's smiling because he's been through two of them.
and it's been greatly beneficial. But the one thing that we want to just highlight on trust is that trusting your team as a leader does not mean abdicating your responsibility. As a leader, you're still accountable for the results that the team produces. So I think one of a good principle that we've applied is that you, as a leader, you keep your nose in but your hands out, in the sense that you're always on top of your business. You understand what's happening. And because you're there to support your team, doesn't mean you don't trust them, you're guiding them. But blind trust and abdication can also be disastrous. So you must have the EQ that Mike talks about to know when to do what.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I think we often underestimate and undervalue, I think, the power of emotions and how emotions show up. They can either be completely disruptive and bring about chaos if they're not well regulated by the individual. So, i.e., people's ability or inability to resolve conflict in the workplace. So, how do we, disagree respectfully while still maintaining a sense of honesty and integrity? But also on the flip side is, how do you then self-regulate that you're able to add value to teams? VANNIE, I want to come to you because you're a subject matter expert in this space, and I'm sure you've counseled
many leaders
around power and the value of emotions.
And
what does that look like from the lens of empowerment? what has been some of your experiences, and maybe one or two tangible examples people can walk away with when they go back to their workplaces and think, how best can I show up as a leader that empowers others?
And I think for me, you know, when we decided to do this panel, and thanks again to Mike and Rishi, what you shared now with me is so profound. The psychological impact, the emotional intelligence impact in terms of leadership and change is the starting point. So if you had to ask me, that's the starting point. You absolutely on point. If you read the Aristotle projects that Google did in 2012, and you're right, Mike, it just takes you back, right? That's when the research was done, and we're starting to create more and more awareness now and wanting to apply it, right? So in 2012, they did the project. It took them 5 years, and in true Google style, with all the algorithms, they tell you what the number one thing to create empowerment, employee engagement, and it's exactly what you're doing: psychological safety. So you're doing this how many years later, exactly to your point, that it's nothing new. It's just about the how. And that's what we must be able to take away from this. Do it and focus on giving your team, firstly, a sense of you can be vulnerable. That's the first thing. Because vulnerability is strength. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I actually don't know how to do it. I've got personal challenges. I've got issues all around me. I want to show up and I want to be the best version of myself. Help me. So going through the psychological change, firstly, that starts with you. And for me, that's the first, tip is you have to deal with the me first as a leader before you can see the change in your team and in the people that you lead. So that's the first step, and I love that. And maybe if Mike and Rishi can share other examples, I'll then be able to build into what what leadership is about. And it is, just to reiterate and recap, what you're sharing with us is change starts with you, and you need a safe space to be the best version of yourself.
And I guess my question for Rishi, sorry, go ahead. Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in and just layer more onto that, actually, because I've highlighted in the last 3 teams that I've led this process of emotional intelligence and understanding one's vulnerabilities and what triggers what triggers you, both in yourself first, but obviously teams. But I've also done a small little gap in between where I did a bit of consulting for some SMEs, and even at a level below just the emotional level, what I find with a lot of smaller organizations, medium-sized organizations with leaders that can be the owner, or that very often in those organizations, it's very much about the owner, the CEO, and not about the team. And at that level, people battle to make the transition. And also what I find is they pride themselves on being entrepreneurial and agile. And so what you find is there's chop and change. And today we're doing this, but tomorrow we're doing that. Today, this is the strategy. Tomorrow, that's the strategy. And so they're all over the place. And so again, it starts with the leader stopping and reflecting on what are we doing, clearly articulating strategy, setting the strategy, communicating the strategy, and sticking with the strategy. And it's just that's a fundamental discipline about strategic planning and commitment. And yes, that doesn't mean you can't be agile and it can't change, but it can't flip-flop every day, every week. And I've seen a lot of that in small and medium enterprises. So both at emotional level, but also at a strategic and communication level, it almost always starts with the leader first.
Yeah. Thanks.
In fact, not even almost. It always starts with the leader.
Yeah, and I think, Andisa, you must hold me back, because I and then maybe it's not about this, but I have to just pick on that. Disciplined thought leads to disciplined action, and you absolutely so on point, Mike. A lot of the research is showing that that's the entrepreneurial. You're visionaries. You want to move forward. You want to see this new thing in the market, and then you want to do it because you think that's going to elevate your business. But to your point, disciplined thought leads to disciplined action. Again, it's about me leaving my ego behind. Can I use the word ego? Is that real? Am I being too harsh? Leaving
No.
my ego behind and then saying, I want to be disciplined and I want to execute.